What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Daniel and Mark show, brought to you by Hardcore Headstart. As usual, Marky and I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but we're about to get into it. Marky, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Man, absolutely ripper. Absolutely ripper. What's going on?
No, not a lot. I think it's been a fairly eventful week. Starting with the protests and the earthquakes, and the AFL short weekend. It's been a pretty eventful week all around. I think.
Yeah, it's
What's been
been.
what's been the highlight of your week?
Well, the highlight was definitely an earthquake.
Yeah.
I
What
mean,
tell me what were you doing at the time?
I think all three of us, that was Sama, Dylan, and I think we were upstairs on the third level of our house. And you just get like a little shake, first of all.
Yeah.
And like we were like, what the hell was that? And for some reason, like my first thought was washing machine, because we have a washing machine going all the time and it shakes a little bit. I was like, oh, it
Yeah.
must be shaking the house, because it does just slightly. But
Yeah.
it obviously getting a little bit more aggressive. And yeah, fucking we saw after, or I saw after on social media, I should say, that everyone was like running outside and that's what you're meant to do. But our only thing that we said was, oh, I think Dylan said, he was like, what are we meant to do? And we just like stood there. So I was like, shit, we should have reacted a little bit better than that. What about you?
I I remember from school they'll like, find something sturdy like a table or something and just crouch under it. Like, wasn't isn't that is that a thing or
Yeah, I heard all that, but
yeah.
dude, if a
Uh,
house is falling in on you, how much is a table going to do?
yeah, it's a good point. I think like the scary thing is like, when you watch movies and like, people are sort of going through these tight caves that no one goes through, and then they get, starts like crumbling above them, and then they get stuck on the rubble and they're just like, ah, fuck, I'm dying alive. And like,
Yeah.
there's a thing on my leg.
Yep.
Like imagine that, but like with bricks and like house debris, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, I think I was on a Zoom meeting or something. Jenny was over in the morning,
Mm.
and she's like, "Your windows are vibrating." He's like, "Is there someone on the other side trying to break into your house?" like, just the Hulk or like Ziz, like on the other side, just going, "Fuck yeah."
He's actually just grabbing the house. He's just
Yeah,
shaking the thing.
just,
What the hell?
just
Yeah.
just shaking it by the bars in front of my windows, dude. Uh, my thoughts was mum, like I thought because she was vacuuming at the same time, and like I just thought like maybe like she's just vacuuming into the corners of the wall, and it's kind of like just vibrating, like, and it's sort of like rippling through the frame of the house or something.
Mm.
And then I think it was like 7 or 8 seconds later, you felt the ground move, and I was just like, fuck, like, oh shit, what the fuck's going on? Yeah. But I didn't quite process it. It's almost like you're in shock because you don't have a cue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jenny was like already kind of walking a bit. So like she, for some reason, said she didn't really feel it.
Oh,
So
really?
interesting. Because I was sitting still. Were you standing or like what were you doing at the
Standing,
time?
yeah.
And you
Standing still, yeah.
still, so you felt it when you're standing still there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But my dad said that he was on a golf course, and he's got funny stories in the toilet. So like it was a impressive shit. But like all of his boys were out on the golf course and they said they didn't feel it at all.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So interesting what that was. But
Yeah.
first
Jenny,
one.
speaking about like taking a shit, like Jenny's older brother, like
Yeah.
flushes the toilet after doing the number two, and like as soon as he flushes, like the earthquake happens. So he's just like, fuck, that must have been a bad turn. They didn't like that one.
Dude, he's just dropping massive deuces. That's hilarious. Far out, man. What the
that,
fuck? That's
that was that was your first earthquake you've ever experienced, or
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. As far as I can like remember, like
Apparently there
being
was one.
significant.
I think there was one maybe like 16 years ago, but like people talked about it, but I never felt it.
Yeah, I think that was the most significant one. It's interesting how that was like a magnitude 6, wasn't it? I
Yeah.
believe was the reports. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty. That's a decent one, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know, like someone said this, but I haven't like checked if it's true or not. But apparently, like it originated like from the US, and the plates kind of like shifted and it came around. But I don't know how true that is. It might be unreliable. But
I
if
don't
if
know.
that's that's true. It's pretty interesting because Australia, because we're so far from the other plates, we don't really get that many earthquakes. I don't think like the tech is it tectonic plates or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tectonic plates. Yeah. Oh, right, man. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I know a few people who have like gone through a few earthquakes in different countries and stuff like that, but never
Mm.
myself. And obviously, I think we were very lucky because it just didn't seem to go for that long, or wasn't it seem to be that powerful. But
Yeah.
far out, man. They are. I
You know,
can
it's
see. I can see how nature is a bit of a bitch. Far.
by design,
Yeah,
keep us on
exactly.
our keep us on our
Bloody
toes.
powerful, man. Far out.
You know what's funny? Like, it's fun. I found amusing how like jokes travel so quickly, or people just think alike. Because there was like Jenny's younger brother was like, "Oh, it must be those damn tradies," like like stumping their feet or whatever. And then I heard the same joke like less than 3 minutes later
Yeah.
in my work meeting, and I'm just like, I don't know if people are just thinking the same or like just reusing the joke, you know? Like,
Do we want to get into those tradies? What's you got any opinions on that?
uh, yeah, loosely. So I think like for one, like whenever we see like like a group of idiots doing something like that, it's not representative of all the tradies or the entire group.
Fair point.
So when you've got like 0.01% of a group doing something stupid, it doesn't mean the group's stupid.
Right.
You know what I
100%.
mean? And when you see stuff in the media, it's very easy to go, "Oh, those traders are fucking like they're all dumb. Like they're kind of breaking rules or rebellions and this and that." But I think you got to sort of take a step back and go, "Okay, like you know, this is a small group. This is the extreme. This is kind of like the 5% or 1% in the group."
Mm,
And unless you have like friends that are tradies, unless you have like a lot of sort of people that you know that are tradies, you probably don't have good representation other than what you're being fed by the media.
mm,
But in terms of like the whole thing, I think the mandated vaccines probably I don't agree with.
I agree.
I think people should have choice. I think the violence was not warranted though. So like kicking the dogs and like sort of taking down those vaccination hubs and carrying on that sort of shit. Like I don't agree with that. Um, and I think like attacking the unions and stuff. So the guys who give them overtime, the guys who give them extra pay, give them RDOs every fortnight, they're able to
Mhm.
work during this time. It's kind of like it seems a bit yeah, unnecessary. But again, to the very first point, it's a small minority of the entire group. That's
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely. I just
yeah.
the one thing about it is I don't see how it results in like what it is they want.
Mm,
Right. So maybe, yeah, fair enough. Mandatory vaccines, it doesn't really make sense. It also doesn't seem like a necessary thing to do, just
mm,
based on the fact like, okay, if you want to go to work, um, maybe like privately, I should say, like each person, like you have your own rules. Like if you want to go, if you want these people to enter or they want to work for you, then they have to have the vaccine, but not as like a government law kind of thing.
mm,
And then it's kind of like implied that it's going to be necessary anyway. Like for us, the big thing for me is like I'm still on the fence, if that makes sense, but I'm leaning towards it because like if I don't get it, I can't travel.
yeah.
So it's like implied force anyway. I'm like, fuck, I'm just gonna have to go get it. So is it really like putting that out there as, hey, you have to go get it? It's mandatory. Is it necessary? I don't really know. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't think violence is really ever the answer, is it?
Nah, never, never.
Doesn't seem to
I
make
think
sense.
I, you know, I've always kind of lived my life as kind of, sort of not like really an alpha, but more like an amiga. So I kind of walk my own path. I don't necessarily lead people, but I'm willing to go my own way, sort of thing.
Mm,
And I'm happy to be in the minority, like 10-20% when it comes to doing things. But when it comes to like health and stuff, where I don't know as much as the experts, or I'm not as interested in that area, I kind of rather be led in being the 80% and like follow sort of the majority of people.
yeah, it's like
Um,
the right time to be a sheep, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Mm,
No, I think that makes sense. And I think like I'm looking I think I am gonna get it or start to book it in within next week. It's just
mm,
yeah, like we've said it so many times on the podcast already. It's just like the long-term effects. I'm like, wow, what the and there's
mm,
so many like difference in opinion, but there's also like just people trying to cause havoc as well. So like for other people who are maybe not as educated or not put as much time into like understanding the different problems, it can really kind of influence one's opinion. Like I heard the other day that COVID, the vaccine 100% gives you autism in 10 years.
Okay. Well, there's no way they
Like,
can prove that because a there hasn't been in a there hasn't been enough time to test it, and b like we haven't seen any long term effects because it's too short term, right? So you could say yes, there's going to be some things we're going to find out 10 years down the track,
right.
but equally, if you can't be conclusive about it leading to long term problems, how can you say that it will
Exactly. It's
cause
like,
something for
yeah,
sure? Yeah.
that's exactly right. Like it's impossible to actually know that answer.
And
Um,
besides, I'm kind of autistic anyway, so it doesn't really fucking matter.
aren't we, aren't we all on the goddamn spectrum anyway? The
Yeah.
spectrum is this damn long. We're all on there somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, it's just like that kind of, um, I don't know the correct word, but maybe like influence or just opinion doesn't seem helpful.
Yeah.
Like you're actually saying something just to say something.
Mm.
There's no kind of like advice or consultation or help or value added in that statement. It's literally
Mm.
just like trying to cause panic. And I'm like, I see a lot of it, and it just doesn't seem to make sense why people would do that um,
Yeah.
to me.
It
But yeah,
it's kind of difficult because I suppose like as soon as you start thinking for yourself, you kind of go, oh yeah, big pharmaceutical, they're all profiteering, and like it's pretty dark in that sort of field, and like
mm,
the banks, like obviously a bit darker than you think when you grow up, but at the same time, like the pharmaceuticals do provide like a solution. So they start with good intentions first. Once they find the solution, then they profiteer because they figure out how to distribute it and get as much margin as possible. But at the start, they do focus on solving the problem first, and then the profiteering. So the evil happens after. That's how I kind of see it.
greed takes over. I guess the only thing about the pharmaceuticals is there an actual like one pill solve cure kind of thing, or does it always have to be like a thing you have to take every 3 months?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
Actually,
like,
I guess that's probably one thing that I haven't probably thought about much, but it's like, okay, so does this mean we're gonna have a booster shot every 6 months for the
yeah,
next like
exactly.
5 years?
Yeah.
So,
When you start looking at it like that, you're like, oh, I don't know. But it's
mm,
like, if it's still safe to take and it actually helps, even though we have to potentially pay for it or get it every 6 months, it's like, it still seems all right.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, I'd prefer one jab. Gee, we're all sweet. Um, or I'd prefer like fucking, we all just did herd immunity in the very first point. Now we're all sweet, but that's all
mm,
past tense. It's not very helpful or valuable. It's just like, oh, if we did this or if we did that, or if it's like, yeah, but we didn't. So now we're here. What do we do? And it's kind of like
yeah,
that possible inaction or something at the beginning has led to us to where we are now. Fine, you can say it was a mistake, but we're here now. So what do we do? It's like taking extreme ownership of this thing, of the situation you're in. It's like, all right, we made a mistake, or someone made a mistake, but what do we do to next?
mm,
It's yeah, that's kind of how I'm trying to think about it. It's like, what am I going to
yeah,
do next? And trying to
yeah,
think through it as much, because it's one of those decisions. Sorry to cut you off. It's one of those, like, all decisions are like made in two ways, and this is what Jeff Bezos says. It's either a
mm,
decision that you can make quickly and then eventually take back, or the
mm,
decision that you have to think through because you can't take it back. And this is,
mm,
for me, one of those decisions. Once I take the vaccine, I have to. It's done.
yeah,
Right? I can't take it back. So I'm like, I want to try and do as much thinking as possible, to understand as much as possible, and then take it.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, the sheep kind of, like, a lot of people are getting it. The sheep mentality of like, it seems like the 80% are taking it. It seems like a good idea to take it. Um,
mm,
that's kind of pushing me down that path.
yeah, for sure. I think like the 80% of people taking it generally means that you know there's a consensus that it's the right thing to do. But then I guess like so that's one checkpoint. The other checkpoint is like going to the experts and kind of going, all right, let's find a sample size of 5 different people that kind of are in the medical field but maybe have varying opinions, and
Mm,
then trying to, do your own research of like maybe drawing, bringing up a notepad on one side, writing down the arguments for, the arguments against,
mm,
and then kind of just understanding, all right, look, these are the risks, these are the arguments, for, like on both sides, and then just making a judgment call. It's kind of like, instead of following the majority, you're kind of looking at, all right, who are the experts in this field? Let's try to get a varying opinions, and then from, the information you have, make a decision based on what you know best. And then once you've made that decision, the most important thing is to kind of move forward and be like, all right, I've made that decision. If it's a bad decision, then I'll deal with it. And most humans are pretty resilient. Like, fuck, like when the polio came out and everyone got injected, like, medicines, like people didn't think twice. Yeah, they got the shot, and
mm.
sure, maybe, some people were born with three eyes or or whatever, but i think I think medicine's come a long way, and I don't think there was that big of a thing when polio was given. And even like, yeah, I think a lot of vaccines that came after, there was always a first time for a lot of the vaccines, right? So but yeah, granted, there's probably a bit more research, and like it takes a bit longer. So this is probably what's different this time. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know enough. But from what I know, it gave me enough confidence to kind of go, all right, look, I'll make a decision. I'll live with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is like there's also a community thing, I guess, is like people close to you who you trust and respect their opinions, like yourself. You're going to
Mm.
get the vaccine. I'm like, yeah, I guess it's kind of like helps the people around you kind of process a little bit more. I was like, all right, well, you know, not necessarily does he know something I don't, but why does he have the enough conviction, and am I just being a little bit paranoid, et cetera, et cetera. So it's
Yeah.
but yeah, the whole I guess like this conversation we're having, we're all on one side of like, yeah, leading towards getting it, but this is like a healthy conversation about it, where a lot of times you just see the polar outliers on both ends of the spectrum of like
Mm.
you have to go and get it. No, like that's it, or it's the worst thing ever and you're gonna get autism, which
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
where's
It's
the
it's
healthy conversation?
become kind of political and sort of like a dividing factor amongst friends, amongst family, that
Hmm.
sort of thing, which has been interesting.
Yeah. I also heard I'm not sure if you heard this as well, but the protesters were like a subplot to it, or it kind of evolved into a main point, was complaining about them not being able to have breaks while working.
Well, that's what I thought it was originally. I was like, these guys are like making sausage sizzles and stuff like in the middle of the city. They got these like portable barbecues, and
Yeah,
they're cooking up a feast. Like it seemed like a bit of a joke at the time.
yeah. So I'm
Uh,
like, if
yeah.
that's like, obviously, how are we going to know what the original point is? Because we're not following it that well. I'm not following it that closely. But if it is that, don't be a fucking child. Oh my
Mm,
days. Like, I know a few nurses, and I know just from what they're posting, and they're absolutely working their ass off, like right now, you know,
100%.
like, and there's a lot of people out in the world who literally just don't get breaks, especially, we speak about third world countries all the time. Like, breaks are not an option, you know. It's- What
Mm,
the hell what are you talking about? Like, it's not like your life has just changed and the worst thing ever. Just, it's not even like you can't have a break. Just go eat by yourself, for Christ's sake. What the hell are you talking about?
yeah.
I don't know. That's just. I'm not
I
sure if I'm
suppose.
crazy. It's just annoying.
Nah, it's I think um I think along those lines, a lot of people really sort of judge the actions of these guys that stood up against the break rooms, because there's that argument of, construction has been the one industry that's been able to work through this entire period. And, you look at arts, you look at entertainment, non existent, right? Like literally, people who are at the highest risk of getting or contracting the virus are having to go to work to supply that, like, to provide for their families. And then people who want to work, like in entertainment, comedy, festivals, whatever, right? They can't go
Mhm.
and make an income. So like it's kind of like that privileged,
Yeah,
kind of that
exactly.
being in that privileged position. And then like, there's privilege between uh someone who's in entertainment versus someone who's in building and is considered essential services. But then there's also privilege of, hey, you're in Australia, you get the choice to get the vaccine versus, you're in Vietnam or China and you don't have a choice, right? Of getting the vaccine. You'd kill to get the vaccine. People can't get food from like outside of their sort of radius because their the lockdown is so strict that people can't come in and out of like neighborhoods. So
Mhm.
it's kind of puts things into context. But
Mm.
I think like I've seen more positive come out of COVID, or maybe I'm choosing to see it. But like
Yeah.
I've seen like the stuff that we're doing, the stuff that people are kind of going, hey, look, this is the reality. Let's just accept it and make the most of it. I'm seeing a lot of that too.
Mm.
So I think it's net. I think it's been good for most people. I mean, like I'm just lucky I haven't had anybody have COVID like in like that I personally know. So that's a big thing too.
That's also another thing. Do you know anyone that's actually had COVID at all? Like you just said you didn't, and I don't.
Yeah, no, I don't. I have a client from work. Their immediate family. Um, there was I think it was a cousin's mother who basically was against the vaccine, so she didn't get the shot, and then um, she contracted the first COVID, right, and recovered from it, but she had like lingering like lung like issues,
Mm.
but she didn't get the vaccine. And then the Delta strain came around this year, and her son got the vaccine, but again, she decided not to get the vaccine, even though she had COVID and gone through all that, right? She contracts COVID again, right? And she goes into a coma for like three to 6 months or something like that.
Oh my
Um,
days.
he gets like the flu symptoms for like 4 or 5 days, and he recovers perfectly, no issues with him, right? And she comes out of the coma, she kind of recovers, but she's going to have ongoing issues. Granted, she's a bit older, but um, he said in his circle, there a lot of his family's in medicine and like they're all sort of educated and stuff.
Mm.
Um, and most of the people got the vaccine. No one's had an issue, but I mean, very small sample size. But I just found
Sure.
that kind of interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you're right. And like one thing that kind of screams to me is perspective. So for
yeah,
him, like he'd be like pushing everyone, hey, like go get the vaccine, go get the vaccine, go get the vaccine. In my case, I think I'm a touch wary because I literally don't know anyone who's actually been affected by COVID properly.
yeah,
Like sorry, maybe that's a bit harsh. Like financially, it's been a bit tough on people. That's fair, but like actual contracting COVID or health reasons, I don't know anyone. So I don't have that kind of sample size to pull from, and like living vicariously through other people only goes so far, right?
yeah,
So that's kind of obviously adding a touch of like bias to like, or um, maybe ignorance
mm,
potentially if I'm like the thinking is not necessary
mm,
to to the situation. But it's perspective is
mm.
funny like that. It's always past tense, right?
And I think it's always evolving too. So like you know, a month ago it seemed like there was a huge shortage of vaccines,
Yeah,
and then like we're hearing like, hey, another 4.5 million dosages are coming from the UK. Moderna's suddenly coming now, so you got like three options, and it's like, okay, maybe it pays to kind of like be open to getting the vaccine, but waiting a little bit, kind of going,
yeah,
hey, let's see how this evolves. The cases are rising. If the cases start spreading to, my local area, or like, it starts becoming a bigger problem, then you can get the vaccine later. So like, I
yeah,
kind of see both sides of it, but
yeah,
so I mean, traveling. If borders open up and lockdowns, like the way I kind of see it is, if they just go, all right, we're at 2,000 cases and we're just going to open up, and people can live normally, as long as we're 80% vaccinated, then you're kind of like, oh, do I want to be the person that can't do anything and, be in that
yeah.
like 20%? So there's that side too.
That's the exact kind of conversation I'm having in my head. Is like
Yeah,
not fussed if I can't go to the bar or can't go there. That's all right.
traveling.
But when it comes down to traveling, I'm like, shit, man. I
Mm.
really want to go traveling. I really
Bali.
don't. I really don't want to be here. I really want to go overseas. So it's like, um, yeah, it's an interesting one. What else have we got in the cards though? Because we could talk about COVID all freaking day. What else happened
Yeah.
this week?
Uh, well, do you want to talk about like Dylan's run yesterday? Because I saw the stories and fuck, it got me pumped up.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I didn't even know he was doing it. I literally like he went crazy. I was out and then I just saw his Instagram stories like everyone else. And he was just going crazy. So uh I think he got motivated by what he was saying, Johnny's Johnny's podcast, or just I think he had a conversation with Johnny that day or something.
yeah.
And he's really dedicating a lot of his time to getting shredded after, he had to sacrifice a lot in the beginning of health wise. He had put on a bit of weight during the journey of gaining a lot of knowledge and putting himself in the financial freedom position he is at the moment, and just being an all-round savage. So for him to be focusing more on his health, I mean, people watch this space because dude's about to get shredded, man. So,
Yeah.
pretty sick. But I thought it was funny how like normal people would like communicate over private message. Dylan
Yeah.
just posts like a, "Hey Chrissy G, can you go make my salmon?"
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that and I thought, fuck, did he send it to the wrong person? Like,
So funny, man. I came home like as he was sending that, and G hadn't seen it yet because I think he was reading or watching a movie or something. And I
yeah,
was like, "G, check your Instagram stories." And he checked it. He's like up here, like, "Is he serious? Do I actually cook you salmon?" But yeah, it was really funny. But it just shows testament to mindset and how much you can really, really do if you
mm.
have such a strong frame of mind like Dylan does. And yeah, inspiration to all of us, isn't he?
He went hard. He went far, and he was going a quick pace too. So,
Yeah. And he did a 2 hour bike ride before the run. So he did a
holy,
14K at, I think the pace was 450,
mm.
I think he was saying. Yeah, he did 2 hour bike ride before that. So dude, the whole house is getting pretty fit at the moment. We're pretty working towards something. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I think like it's uh it's interesting. Like with Dylan, I think he said it himself. He's he wouldn't consider himself physically fit,
Mm,
but he's got a strong, very very strong mind. That's one thing he's worked on, and he's kind of really refined
mm,
over the years, and it just goes to show how hard he can sort of push, even
absolutely.
regardless of where he is physically.
Mm.
Um, how he feels the next day might be different though.
I've chatted to him. He feels great. I spoke to
Good,
him
yeah.
this morning. Yeah, he feels great. So I just think he's in that frame of mind where he's like just going hard as hell, and
Gotta go.
it's awesome to see the dude's grinding hard as hell. So just after so many years, like he's in this game for about a decade now, investing in personal finance, and he's still going hard as ever. So I mean,
Mm.
man's a man's a damn savage, I tell you that, for Christ's sake. But his ability, and there's one thing like that people don't really understand until you kind of put yourself in those fatigue situations. We
Yeah.
talk about on the Hardcore Headstart podcast of like willpower and the willpower battery, of how it needs to be replenished with restoration processes, but it can also be expanded.
Mm.
And to expand your willpower battery, you need to put yourself in um, situations that you're at full fatigue, like running or like physical exercise, where you're only running on willpower,
Mm.
right? When you're so tired and you need to stay at like a certain, for running, right? You need to stay at a certain pace or a certain kilometer range where it's just willpower. It's taking so much energy. You're struggling so hard, but it's your mind that continues to push you on. Um, and that's what Dylan talks about when he's talking about his willpower analogy or the willpower battery, expanding that battery. His ability to stay in that range is like some of the best I've ever seen. It's like David Goggins and that kind of like I physically speaking, Sama and I and even G, like we're thinner, we're fitter, looking especially, and
Mm.
like is staying in that range, can't keep up with him. We just
Nah, no.
his mindset's way and years above. Has been through a lot, so it's freaking
I
good.
love
It's good to see, man.
I love that analogy. So yeah, I think it's good to see somebody actually, you know, demonstrate how that can be developed in front of you rather than just hearing about, oh, your mind can do things. But when you see a savage in front of you build that battery from like this to like, this or whatever, right? It makes you go, your willpower can be so much more if you keep exposing yourself to, what you've never done before. You're
For sure.
constantly building the capacity.
Yeah.
And that's a mental side. On the physical side, I've been sort of tracking like sleep with my watch.
Yeah.
So I notice when I go on the longer runs that I've never done before, my heart rate sits like 7 or 8 lower, like heart rate per minute, like
Yep.
sits around 7 or 8 beats lower for the entire night. So that's telling me
Oh,
I'm getting
okay.
I'm getting more deeper rest, right? And my body's really recovering then on the days that I'm really exerting myself. So
Mm,
I think it's really interesting. If you exert yourself, you'll have the other end of it where you have the really deep recovery. So
yeah. No, that's cool, man. That's cool. I think it's yeah, it is obviously I know like when you first start exercising, dude, the amount of sleep you need just to be able to get back to like kind of restored energy, it's
mm,
pretty crazy, isn't it? Like when you first start working out. But it's some of the best
yeah,
sleep you'll ever get.
100%. I think if you haven't worked out in a while or like you're starting a new regiment, you might find you're sleeping more, and I think that's you should allow yourself to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but in time, once you refine your rig, your machine, your the thing you call your body, it starts to operate better with less sleep, or it doesn't
Mm,
require as much sleep if you're sleeping well. And I think that's a combination of working really hard physically during the day, taking time to relax, like meditation or reading, and sort of being positive,
mhm.
and then nutrition, right? The trifecta: stress, nutrition, and sleep. And like, you're $1 million.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What else we got going on? What happened this week?
uh, what's happened? So like Jenny's younger brother, like he
Yep.
he injured his wrist. So the last couple of days, I just said to him like, look, why don't we catch up, and I'll teach you some digital marketing.
Yep.
If it might not be your passion, but it's something that you can try, and like you can learn more and decide if it's interesting to you.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that's it's all online. So if he wants to make a bit of extra income, he can do this alongside his full-time job in something else, whatever it is. So that's been really cool. He's really taken that on board and really impressed. Like, I've asked him to sort of come, uh, you know, to come past my place at 10 o'clock over a couple of days, and he's always coming 10 minutes early, which I'm really impressed, because I'm I'm a guy who always turns up 10 minutes late, because I'm like, all right, I got to be there at 10, so I'll leave at 9:50.
Yeah.
um, and I don't know why I do it to myself. Like, I think when I was growing up, I always like I was really impatient as a kid,
Yeah.
so I hated waiting for people when I was early. But
Yeah.
now I've sort of flipped that on its head, and I'm like, if I'm early, I'm less stressed. I can use that time to
Yeah.
kind of just prepare myself or whatever it
Yeah.
is. Mm.
I am a bit like that where it's like I just don't think I'm just not stressed about a lot. I'm just going with the flow. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
I get there when I get there. But sometimes you got to account for the value of other people's time as well.
yeah. Tell me like about like value of time, right? So because I feel like you've done a lot more coaching and teaching than I have, like just through sort of spending one-on-one time with people. What do you sort of what are sort of things that you look for when you're sort of working with someone to show that they're someone you want to invest more time with when they're kind of when they come to you for help? Is there certain
Yeah.
thing, and is
Um,
there a certain approach that works for you?
it's kind of just understanding their habits and what their life looks like at the moment. People have that people have a lot of biases in their head where, especially if they're like beginning the journey, they think they're doing a lot of work or they think they're doing a lot of something, but they don't track their time well enough. So they kind of convince themselves that they're actually doing something that they're not.
Yeah.
And I know like we can all, everyone listening will understand this. Like it gets me sometimes as well, but like TikTok or Instagram, social media, like you'll think you spend 20 minutes on it a day or an hour a day, but if you check your screen time, it's like insane. Like it's hours upon hours upon hours. And that's just a small example of how kind of our brain convinces ourselves that we're actually doing a good job or justifies that we're doing better than we actually are. So,
Yeah.
it's always a like how to manage time. I remember back in the day, like when first starting the journey, like I'm not sure of the increments, but it's like half an hour scheduled of like what we're going to do next, then do this, then do this, then do this, then do this. And it's going like balls to the wall and trying to fit as much in the day as possible.
Yeah.
Blessed to not have to do that as much anymore. But it's because I live like a different kind of life. But especially at the start, you don't understand where you are spending most of your time. And
Mm.
in relation to kind of like a mentor or having someone else in your life who's trying to help you, sometimes you need to understand the value of that person. So, because we're lucky enough to spend so much time accumulating so much knowledge, right? My hourly rate is higher than someone else's who hasn't gone through the entire journey, right? So, in that kind of perspective, my time is more valuable, but my time is more valuable to that person as well, because if I can give them that time, I can teach them more, which means their hourly rate increases as well. Does that make sense?
100%.
So,
You're reverse engineering, what a mentee or the person maybe that isn't necessarily like able to provide value to the other person, right? In that moment, and what they can do to, potentially be a better mentee, or like to kind of understand the relationship between the other person, right? And half the equation is just kind of appreciating that, hey, this other person is offering me more value than I'm offering them. So I want to sort of even that sort of, that thing in a way, or at least showing appreciation, the time, the commitment, the interest, like that sort of thing, right? Like
mm,
if you're kind of turning up like, hey, you kind of owe this to me, and you're not providing any value to the other person, you're kind of like, well, as the mentor, you're not going to want to spend time with that person, right?
yeah, exactly. And it's like for me, like a lot of the consultation or any like mentoring I do is it's never paid, but I don't ever want to be paid for it because it's like what do I enjoy doing? Maybe eventually it'll turn into something like business wise, and it probably will. But the moment I'm in a stage where I just need to continuously improve my reputation,
Mm.
because of a lot of my reputation out in the world is a different kind of person. Because I left as a different person, I haven't put this new self, I haven't put this new me out in the world as much yet. So
Yeah.
it's just about providing as much free value as possible to as many people as possible. But yeah, and that can come across as like when you say the word mentor, it has like that kind of negative connotation of like scammer sometimes.
Yeah.
Like
I,
how like anyone who's ever been CoffeeZilla is like a mentor or a bloody coach or some crap. But I a lot of people don't use those words because they have a negative connotation. I like to use them still because I want to change the connotation of them.
yeah,
It's
100%.
like mentor is the right word, or rich is the right word. Like rich has this negative connotation of like, oh, you like if you're rich, you're egotistical. And
Mm.
rich is literally just a word. It's people act like that certain way. I can be rich and humble. I can be rich and wise, you know.
Mm.
And people use the word wealth instead of rich for people who are wise and not egotistical, but I think it's a cop out,
Yeah.
And it's like use the word rich, just change what it fucking means to people. So, but that's a bit of a tangent, so I apologize.
Nah, nah. I think the tangents are good, and I think you touch on a like an interesting point. I think it's we kind of, while like sometimes using the different word might help you sort of get through to the other person a bit easier, because like sometimes we might sort of, if our defense is up, you're like, oh, this person is like, oh, I'm gonna put Daniel into a box because he used this word, so he's probably that person, right? That can be useful, but at the same time, it's not addressing the problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not getting to the, hey, you've got not negative connotation. You shouldn't have a negative connotation to a word, you should have a negative connotation to a person's actions. You
Mhm.
know, like not just what they say or what that what language or vernacular they're using.
Yeah,
It shouldn't
exactly.
matter.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
single time. It's yeah. People terminology is quite important. Like, both of us are in the sales game of like, what
Mm,
one thing we both get to do, which we love doing, is do free consultations with people and help them get invested with us. And the reality situation is it does take a certain amount of sales expertise or say sales skills. So using different terminology does help, but exactly to your point, it's like if I just use the word wealth and try and sound smart, like I don't use that word,
mm,
right? So I want to be me all the time.
yeah.
I don't use that word in real life. I don't like I get, oh, I want to be wealthy, like I've used it, but I want to be rich, man. Simple. I want to be smart as shit.
Mm,
Like, and people will say they use different words as a sales technique to exactly as you're saying, don't put up those defensive mechanisms. But unless you explain that to people, like give a definition of what rich means to you, you're never going to change it in other people's eyes, and the culture will always stay the same.
mm,
And that's not what we're about. We're about changing culture for the better. We're about helping as many people as possible. And, it's just a small things like that that I think will continuously help people.
yeah. Yeah. I think like, you know, continuously helping people and focusing on providing value,
Mm.
it's really rewarding, right? Like when um, it's equally frustrating when you try to communicate something and somebody doesn't quite like get it, or like you feel like they don't get it from your perspective. But on the other hand, when it clicks for them and they go, "Fuck, you changed my life," that's like one of the like greatest things like a student or like the person that you're coaching can say back to you as the person providing value. Um, and I suppose one thing I'm kind of self auditing as I'm sort of like coaching or being in that teacher position is, like what can I do to inspire this person to now help other people and become a teacher in their own life, right? Like there's going to be other people that they can teach what they've just learned so they can further ingrain what these new concepts that they are now practicing. Like what better way to embody something than to then go on and try to teach it or encourage it to somebody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not even gonna that's perfect. So it's all
What's
about building people who can then help other people.
Yeah.
That's what
What
true
what
value is.
what draws you to sort of like teaching and helping other people? Is it kind of like how you feel about it, or like is there what sort of goes through your train of thought when you're helping others?
Um, well, the one thing is always like that one quote I've used 100 times, but it's be who you needed when you were younger,
Yeah.
right? Now, me personally, I was incredibly lucky, and I understand this to have someone when I was younger. Like I had Dylan as a mentor. He taught me a lot of like pretty much everything I know, and
Yeah.
like had played the biggest part in creating the person I am today. Um, and like that's a blessing for me, but it doesn't mean I just take it for granted, or not necessarily take it for granted, but it's not like, oh, okay, good. And now I just live my life. Like for me, it's something I need to help give back to other people. Um, so if I can, kind of reverse engineer or recreate what Dylan's done with me with other people, we can start changing an entire culture and start changing an entire other, um, yeah, culture's the right word there. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah.
gives me. Plus, I enjoy doing it. Like this, like it really gives me happiness. I always like buying things for other people, not necessarily myself. Like I like providing. I
Yeah.
just like giving, giving, giving. It makes me happier than actually getting, because I feel like getting things just for me already gets boring.
Mm.
I like
I
giving.
I think like that's an interesting point, right? Like let's say you're let's say if you were the opposite, right? Let's say if you weren't somebody who was a person that gave gifts. If by teaching and coaching and helping other people, you, as a token of appreciation, one of your students or one of the people you're working with buys you a gift, that can then make you that can then raise that sort of thought of, hey, that was really nice. This person got me a gift. I never thought of getting a gift for somebody else, and that in turn can kind of give you this feedback loop of like, all right, I've got people who provide a ton of value to me, and I'm providing value to other people. What are some of the ideas, or what are some of the things that makes me feel valued as a coach that I can then make my coach feel valued? Sort of
Yeah.
passing that
Yeah.
up, not just down, if that sort of
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just fulfilling, self-fulfilling. Like it's always just a massive loop
Mm.
of the right way to do things. So
Let's change gears again.
yeah, I'm loving it.
What's happening? Yeah, what's happening with Hardcore Head Start with the podcast? Do you guys feel like there's a certain direction you guys are going? Like you
Yep.
guys have been killing it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
man. Well, like you're a part of that as well. So fucking we've been killing it.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard because it's like like we're in lockdown still. So you always can't come over and like actually be on it. But there's always the feedback that we very much appreciate because we miss things sometimes. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, like we've said on the podcast 100 times, what we're trying to do is recreate, not recreate. We are trying to create a like turnkey solution for personal development and um, building the building blocks to become a successful person. So for us, we are trying to, we see a lot of people in the market. What they do when they provide information or curate information is they give you the you know the end of the picture always, the sexiest stuff, what it results in. It's like what you can become, but they don't actually give you the A, B, C's, D's, E's of like how to get there. So
yeah,
what we are creating is the entire picture from the start. We talk about a lot about investing in finance, just in our personal lives, and that's where we're at now, but it's not where we started. We started with personal development only, right? Understanding ego, understanding the things we're talking about, willpower, understanding stream ownership, top 5 heroes, all the podcasts that we've previously done. We are recreating what we went through as mentees for other people out there. So it's really, really important to start from the start when you watch our podcast. Start from the start. It's like a mini series or like a documentary from the beginning.
mm,
So and do the work. Actually listen to it, understand it, apply it in your life, use the value that are in the podcast. And like I believe we're finding our niche, like not in niche, but we're finding our style now. We're really, really finding like how we gel together. Dude, I'm not sure if I'm sure you've listened to the last couple. Dude, they're funny as fuck.
they're good. They're good.
They're so funny, but there's so much value packed into them. Like we're even having a conversation at the moment. Like, are we packing too much value in?
Yeah,
Do we need to like go even more in depth on certain things? So we're really, really focusing on how we can create the entire kind of structure or mini series or course of development of a person, of a successful person, who actually can achieve financial freedom as early as possible.
yeah.
So yeah,
I think I think the value on these podcasts is like insane, right? Incredible amounts of nuggets, little pieces of information, relatable advice, analogies, stories, like heaps of like banter, comedy. Like it's awesome. Yeah, I think like with the value adding, the only thing that could potentially change is like the format, maybe like finding ways to make it more digestible. But I
mm,
think like in terms of the content itself, it's good. But I think the only thing would be like sort of the other side of people are time poor, like they're busy and they might not maybe an hour format works better, or like an hour and a half, and that's kind of where like you just kind of maybe like experiment a little bit.
mm.
I mean, personally, do you like listening to like longer podcasts? Do you have like a threshold of like how long you sort of want to watch content for?
I don't anymore. Not
Yeah,
anymore. I can
yeah,
I can really stay in the zone for as long as possible when it comes to that. Um,
yeah,
yeah, like the Joe Rogan episode is like 3.5 hours. Like
yeah,
I love that.
yeah,
I love that shit. That's
yeah,
just me. I think long form content, what people need to realize, and this is a massive challenge that people need to get past, is kind of having that conceived notion that I don't have time to listen to an entire podcast.
yeah,
It's like, all right, if you listen to this one podcast, right, and it gives you this amount of value and it changes your entire life, was spending that time worth it?
Mm.
The answer for every single one of our podcasts is the time spent on watching the podcast is worth it. We can't get the message across to you in 25 minutes as
That's
well
true.
as we can in 2 hours
Yeah.
because we're humans. We
Mm.
understand the brain as you guys can't understand it in 25 minutes, nor can we explain it in 25 minutes. So it's like
Mm.
we have to do that long form content, and people need to get past that fact of like, long form content, I don't have time to watch it or I don't enjoy it. It's like you will enjoy it. You need to continuously build up the focus amount of your focus side and try and focus for longer. Start small with the podcast as well. Like I tell people, watch 10 minutes, turn it off.
Yeah.
Watch 15 minutes, turn it off. Watch 20 minutes, turn it off. And I guarantee what happens is you watch 10 minutes and then you're in a point. So you're like, oh, I'll finish this point. Then you're 15 minutes, then you're 20 minutes, then you're half an hour. Because our podcasts are not boring. They're
Yeah.
fucking hilarious. And you're
Yeah.
learning shit the entire time. So you're staying engaged. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, my brain is just getting bigger this entire time. You're writing things down, you're understanding how you're going to apply it in your life.
Mm.
It's I'm obviously biased because I think we're doing one of the best jobs in podcasting possible, but I really, really, really do believe that the long form content is the best way for people to learn. It's like a short book,
Yeah.
right? A
I,
book that's like, there's obviously limits to, like, no one wants to read a 10,000 word book, but like
yeah.
there's limits to that upside. But it's like, if our podcast was 7 hours, then it's like,
Mm.
well, fuck, that's probably a bit much on one thing. But like
Yeah.
2 hours is like, that's digestible.
Yeah. I think sort of having all of like the podcast has become a lot more organized, and I can see that you guys stay on the one topic as much as possible. There's a little bit of sort of like banter, and there's sort of you know um, sort of side conversations, but it mostly sticks on one topic. So
Yeah.
you really get a sense of like, hey, this is the multiple angles of energy, right? Because if you just talk about energy, you could potentially make it only a 10-15 minute
Sure.
conversation, but you haven't looked at it from four different people's perspectives. You haven't
Yeah.
sort of hashed out and looked at sort of the different layers, and like sort of going back to first principles, and also just like you said, like a lot of the series is taking people to the very first steps. So it's kind of bringing people along with the journey of like, okay, this is how our energy and the way we have like the way we've sort of developed our habits and stuff over time to improve that energy, but we weren't always there, and we're
Mm.
kind of taking them along from like how it kind of looked as things have changed.
Mm.
Like the
Yeah.
whole plant, like
Yeah.
man, I was glued to the episode with the plants, kind of like, you murked the plants, you went off, and like, your lesson is passed on to Samir, and Samir's kind of like, come back around and sort of saw the other end of it.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, it's fascinating.
Dude, like people, because we're financially free, I've heard from like a close friend that, oh, you like, people think that we're just outliers.
Right.
They're like, oh, well, like, and me specifically, like I'm an outlier. Obviously, the boys around me as well, but like he was talking about me, and I'm like, that's just not true.
Mm,
It's not true. Like I went to school with you guys. You know who I am. All I've
mm.
done is spent more time in a specific field,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Like I just have
Bit of a cop
poured.
out, yeah. Bit
Yeah,
of a
that's
cop.
what I think. It's like I've poured as much time into this as possible to get to a certain place, and now I'm like here trying to give back, and it's like, hey, I can literally help you guys, but it's like, oh no, you're just a different type of person who can only do that.
Mm.
No, no, no,
Yeah,
it's not.
I think,
We're just
I
normal
think
humans.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to decisions. So like everyone is okay working 40 hours a week, right, in a full-time job. If people start going, pushing themselves a little further and going, hey, all right, I'm willing to work 50 hours, right? And that still leaves me with 50 hours of personal life, right? That's not going to change too much, right? In the beginning, you probably have to work 40 hours in a job, and then 10 hours on the thing that's going to be your interest, or the thing that's going to give you more value, right? And then as you develop something or a way to, you know, transition away from your full-time job that you might not necessarily sort of want to do forever, then you can start flipping it on its head, and you can do 40 hours of what you love and 10 hours of, you know, something that supplements your income. But that takes time, right? Like, you didn't do it overnight. You've spent hours, like, and that's 10 hours. That's a slow path. You've spent hundreds of hours, right? And, you know, you're willing to make a lot of sacrifices. But for the average person, for the person who wants to do it slowly, that's where you start. You just go, can I afford another 2 hours each night, or like 3 hours 5 days a week, right?
Mm.
And you know, you can take your weekends off, and that's where the change starts, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I must admit, like to my previous point, it may be a cop out on their behalf, but I think it you know, it's inherently my fault because my reputation is not where it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so it's like taking extreme ownership of that and realizing, and you know, continuously like having these conversations with you and boys out there, and there's a problem for everyone. Like reputation is a massive problem. Um, you know, we even brand in general, like Hardcore Headstart, we're not where our brand wants to be. We want to be, you know, continuously evolving and help people understand exactly who we are and what we are, and that just takes time, man. It just takes time and continuous repetition, consistency. It's not going to happen overnight. Nothing does. So
Yeah.
just keep putting in the reps, man. Keep putting in the reps. I know we as Hardcore Hair Start, and even the Daniel Mark Show and Daniel Treese and Mark Tran individually, like we'll get to where we want to,
Yeah.
but it's yeah.
Yeah. I think yeah, small steps. And you know, I think what we've always had is, you know, this approach of everything we're preaching, everything that we're talking, all the lessons we're providing, it's all accessible, right? We're trying to make it, we're trying to sort of show that it's not out of reach. Everything we're doing is not like, hey, you know, that's too hard. You know, there's steps. You just need to be curious enough. You need to be willing to sort of make those small steps. And we said this 100 times. You don't compare yourself to somebody where they are at their journey today. You compare where they were at their journey when they started, if it's where you're at, and then, you know, progress along there. You can't compare yourself to, if you're starting in sports, right? You don't compare yourself to, you know, the world's best, right? You sort of compare to somebody that's a little ahead of you. And even then, you should be comparing yourself to yourself, but seeing what you can learn from people who have achieved what you've already achieved, I think.
Absolutely. You can aspire to be something better.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if it's really uh, healthy to compete
Mm.
because they're just better at this point,
Yeah.
right? So compete with the person who they were at that time, like you're saying. And
Yeah.
then if you like, that's kind of like that. If you think about it, it's that ladder or that kind of journey of
Mm.
incremental steps that it obviously led to them being successful. You know, it's going to lead you to being successful, right?
Mm.
So, so what else have we got? I might talk about the AFL Grand Final. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course, man. Of course, tell
So
me.
obviously I'm white, so you know AFL is like, you know, I bleed AFL. Not true. I have honestly I've barely watched any games this year. And self confessing, I watched the grand final. I only watched half of it because I honestly got bored. It just doesn't interest me as much as it used to. But
Yeah.
I did go back on YouTube and watch like the last half because apparently someone just live streamed the entire game, by the way, and put it up on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was like still up. I was like, how the fuck is this possible? But I
Yeah.
watched the last half last night again
Mm.
after it finished, and pretty intense. Congratulations to the Melbourne Demons. They won, mate. They smashed them. They actually went crazy. So
What were the demons the favorites, or was it the doggies?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. I think I don't know. I have no idea. But I got a few
Probably.
friends who go from Melbourne, and
Yeah.
uh, funny story. There's a young man by the name of Jake Bowie. We don't necessarily know each other, but I have a lot of friends who were involved in the football club that he played for as a junior.
Yeah.
And he's played, I think, 6 games this year. and then ended up going on as I believe he's like 19 or something, real young, and won a
He's
premiership.
19th grade.
Yeah, I think he's 19 or he might be 20 or something like that. But point is,
Yeah,
he's really, really
yeah.
young, and he's clearly an absolute professional, highly skilled. So congratulations to him and the Demons. And I used to play football for the Higher Football Club. None of them will watch this, but they they obviously did a decent job in breeding him. So good job on them. And
Yeah.
yeah, football, right? Great. Who cares?
Nah, that's awesome. I think like I think like in footy like it's quite a like a taxing sport, and like it's one of those sports like what would you say you'd probably know better than I would. What would you say is kind of like the prime age for a footballer? Is there kind of um you know, barring like outliers, is there certain like um do people sort of like is the prime sort of cut off in their sort of late 20s or early
Yeah,
30s or
I think
yeah
it's changing from like when I honestly was playing, but
yeah
like when I was really soaked in that, I think it's gotten a touch older just with medical advancements and everything like that.
mm,
But I want to say like early 30s is like when they're prime. That's UFC, but maybe it's a touch younger than that.
yeah
I honestly don't know the answer. But one thing I did notice, which might be interesting to people, is I think footballers are considerably like smaller, like they're thinner.
mm,
So like the mass of them is a little bit smaller, and I think that's because the game itself has become a hell of a lot more fast paced
yeah
than previous years. So I just noticed that watching it last night. I was like, the boys are they're like, I remember, maybe I've gotten bigger as well, but like
mm.
kind of relative, like they used to be massive.
Well, on average though, AFL players they're taller than soccer players, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot more jumping, a lot of sort of specking, and like sort of there's an advantage of the height. So
Mm.
you'll have the more sort of athletic looking, less built looking dudes. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Unless is there defensive positions where some of the guys are bigger?
Yeah, there are, but even those lads were considerably like, and by thin I mean like shredded, like yoked, but like very like I feel like they were low body fat.
Nothing like rugby players, in other words.
Nothing like literally the opposite. It was crazy. But one thing that I really did actually enjoy was the skills were very impressive. So
Yeah.
like I've watched a lot of football previous, and it's good to see. I think the skills are getting a lot better. Like they were just very, very clean. Like
Do you
everything was very good.
do you think the game's changed like in the last sort of like 5 years?
Yeah, it's not even the same. Not even close.
How,
Like the
like,
rules.
tell me more about it. Like, how would you describe it? Because I'll admit, like, I probably only watch like the finals, and I probably watch it every 2 years, and I'll
Yeah,
watch half the game.
yeah.
But yeah,
I think previously, like I was saying, the game is just getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And now, like I must be honest, I have not watched much football in the last like 2 or 3 years. So, but just kind of like what I've noticed, being like looking objectively, is the game is getting considerably quicker. Like the movement of the ball, lads are a lot fitter. The rules that are kind of being brought into the game are always inciting everyone to be spaced out and moving all the time.
Mm,
Um, so it's less and like previous kind of olden day football was very like rough and tough and get in and get under and get the ball out and kind of kick it as far forward as possible and then go again. Um,
yeah.
where now it's about short passes, marking, handballing, running on, a lot more, yeah, a lot of fast paced football. And the skills are, like I was saying before, they're wild, like far out. It's very impressive.
Do you think the rules have forced the game to head that way, or
Yeah.
do you think the game is just naturally headed that way?
Well, I think anything that like we got to remember it is a business at all in its entirety, right? Like it's entertainment as well as professional sport, meaning they have to continuously adapt to making it different and new and fun and exciting. So when you're playing that fast-paced game, more things happen.
Yeah.
More so it's I think yeah, they as far as I can tell, and like I said, I haven't watched it for 2 or 3 years, but the game's faster, more things happen, exciting things happen. Um, yeah, the people playing seem considerably more athletic than
Mm,
just big boys running around kicking a ball. So it's not sure if it's better or worse because there
yeah.
is like some of that nostalgia to watching that hard, tough, rough kind of football. Especially
Yeah.
me growing up, I love that kind of stuff. But
I,
it's yeah, it's interesting.
I was gonna say like even if you're not particularly interested in sports, I feel like there's a lot to learn from sports. There's, for example, from what I've heard, that documentary with is it Michael Schumacher? Is it like there's a on
Yeah.
Netflix?
Yeah, yeah.
I think I think that's got like a lot of attention, and a lot of people are saying, even if you're not into Formula One sports, like you have to watch this documentary.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stories within sports. There's a lot of lessons that you can take on board. Um, but yeah, I've never been huge into sports besides like a couple like UFC and like soccer from time to time. Yeah, I think I can see why people get so invested in it. But it's literally like some people's lives, even if they're not playing. you know?
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I think that it's like that for a lot of people. There's something missing in their life, like that community.
Yeah.
So sports, especially local sports, that can be not necessarily the correct environment to become a certain type of person, but when it does fill a community gap. I can be honest with that. Um,
Yeah.
it's yeah, like I grew up pretty much at my own cricket club and around football clubs my entire childhood. That's where I live. So
Yeah.
when it comes to community, and like I said, I mean, it's not breeding the most successful people of all time, but in some areas, if you get like the right coach and the right kind of environmental culture at a club, you can really help young kids who have talent to excel. It creates a lot of leaders. um,
Mm,
Now, do those leaders use their stuff for potential? Not really. A lot of sometimes, but the best do, and they go on to, lead in a lot of other places. I think it's helped my leadership because I was in those types of kind of roles relatively kind of thing. It's hard to kind of explain what it was, but yeah, it was it was necessary. I think I definitely did enjoy it as young, but you grow up kind of bored of it and looking for something different, in my
mm.
personal opinion. Some people just like that and want to stay there, but anyway, I think it
Makes
also has a
sense.
lot of sorry, go.
I was just gonna say, so you make a good point, right? Like sports brings people together, and that's what community is.
Mm,
So naturally, I think as human beings, right, we thrive when we're in communities where we originated from like tribes. So I think whether it's hardcore head start, whether it's kind of like your if you love like pets and dogs or photography or hobby, whatever, if you can find like-minded people and you have a reason to come together, it makes life seem seemingly more meaningful, I
yeah,
think. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's why Hardcore Headstart makes so much sense to me, just like as a business, as a philosophy, and as a lifestyle. It's like everyone for a lot of time can feel like a little bit lost, but Hardcore Headstart themselves, we're a community around becoming the best version of yourself.
Mm,
So target audience, like we can always help people who are younger because they have less uh bias to the world and less like negative habits, but we can really help everyone and anyone,
mm,
because it's just about you becoming the best version of you and achieving like happiness. So there's not really a culture or a community I can find or I've ever seen that focus on that. And that's really, really exciting to me.
it's awesome to be part of it, and like because hardcore head start is, although sort of started all those years back. A lot of work in sort of defining the brand now, and sort of putting out the content and doing all that means like it's exciting. Like you're building something, from and you can decide what is important, what's not, right? Like
Yeah.
whereas something that's a lot more established, it might sort of it's got less flexibility. We're sort of agile, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. No, like we spoke about the time, we're not going to become that corporate conglomerate where it's just like difficult to move. You know what I mean? The way we
You've got to
work.
wear you've got to wear you got to wear a polo shirt or a vest, like a suit.
Fucking hedge fund and shit.
Ties.
Yeah. I actually like wearing suits, but we'll get into that another day.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we wrap it up. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that was a really good chat. I think we covered some really interesting things. If you guys made it to the end, again, thank you for your attention and for listening. Hopefully you learned something today. And as always, thanks for making the time, Doc. Always appreciate these catch-ups.
I very much appreciate your time as well, cutie.
Thanks, mate.
All right, back her up.
Back her up.